the problem with Britain at the moment is because it is not the biggest contributor of troops, United States is. So Gordon Brown has to stick to his guns, and unless and until we see a difference of strategy from the United States, he's not going to be able to afford to differ with the Americans. However, in the grand scheme of things, I think this signifies the difficulty with the Afghanistan problem, which is not, I believe, a military problem anymore, and therefore not any military strategy is not sufficient to deal with the situation there. And I believe that it just shows a complete state of confusion on the side of the contributing countries in Afghanistan, because for the last 8 years they have experimented different types of military tactics and warfare maneuvers, and none has been working. And they, according to some of the recent reports, especially by ICDS, for instance, it shows that the Taliban have a permanent presence in Afghanistan over the 80% of the geography of the country. So these are very serious facts that are coming out, and I think for Gordon Brown, I don't think he's got an option but just to say that he has to stick to his strategy. Yeah,
well, Ian, Hamid's saying there that Gordon Brown waiting for your side of the world, for Barack Obama to make his decision. His decision is based mostly on the military. We're hearing from different voices in the EU sceptical about a military solution. Some reports even saying frustrations over Obama's dealing with Afghanistan, that he's doing it without the EU. In terms of these threats almost that we're hearing towards Hamid Karzai, to what avail are they? And don't they in some ways diminish the stability, the strength of the military operation going on by NATO in Afghanistan at the moment?
Well, in a way, Gordon Brown hasn't just been following on. I mean, he's been trying to act as a spur to Obama to make his mind up. I think that was the purpose of his announcement, obviously, after talking to the British military. And, you know, there isn't a military solution. Their big problem, of course, both for Afghan consumption and for British domestic consumption, is why should people die on behalf of a corrupt government that, you know, seemed to have stolen an election? It was likely, tried to steal an election it was probably going to win anyway. It sort of delegitimized it, and that also goes back to the roots of how the whole operation in Afghanistan started, which was basically a coalition of warlords who were part of the problem, not part of the solution, organized by the CIA to defeat the Taliban. And there's no doubt that the Karzai government was elected, and it was popular, and the Taliban in any polls or election, apart from a few isolated areas amongst the Pashtuns, seemed to be quite unpopular.
Yeah.
But how do you translate that? And one of the things is that, yes, one strategy is to put in more troops, but then you get onto the tactics, and as long as the Allied troops ride roughshod over the local governments, which they're actually more likely to do now that they discover, for example, that Afghan policemen will shoot their colleagues from the British Army while they're on patrol, or that there's this degree of corruption that's being denounced.
Well, let's pick up on that corruption point.
Difficult.
Yeah, let's pick up on the corruption point, because Brown said, and I quote here, sadly, the government of Afghanistan has become a byword for corruption. We also had Bernard Kouchner, the foreign minister of France. He was more specific. He's called Hamid Karzai corrupt, but he's saying he's still their guy in the country. But Hamid, is there anything new that the Afghan government has some corrupt elements in it?
See, the problem I see with this entire situation is that the Western leaders are acting as if they never anticipated this. Hamid Karzai, let's not forget, he's not a powerful leader. When he was brought into Afghanistan, he was brought in because they wanted a person who was not warlord. They wanted the support of the common people, which Hamid Karzai initially did have. But then, as the other speaker pointed out, it's the warlords who stepped in. If you you look into the formation of the current sitting MPs in the Afghanistan parliament, it's shocking to see that some of the people who are there supposedly representing the Afghan constituencies are actually people who have been indicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity and every single type of human rights abuse in the 1990s. So let's give this into context. The problem in Afghanistan is not that Karzai has the magic to move a magic stick and get rid of it. The problem is that these people who are corrupt, and they have been so, were brought in and empowered, unfortunately, by the strategies of the NATO and particularly the American and the British. So the corruption issue will stay as long as the foreigners and the foreign troops there continue to support these warlords and not confront them.
Yeah, Ian, I mean, the Afghan government, as Hamid said, didn't make the mess in the country, or it certainly didn't do it alone. Is it being pushed in a corner to take all the blame and in that way all the responsibility, the making of a scapegoat?
Well, it's difficult. If I were Gordon Brown trying to rally support for what I'm doing, then he's torn between being honest about the person they're using, just like Kushner is, or you're sort of trying to disguise it, in which case you'll get caught out. So I suppose honesty is the best policy, because it's to quote Sarah Palin, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, how on earth do you sort of gild the lily and say that Karzai is a good guy and incorruptible and a staunch Democrat, when his cabinet includes, as we've just heard, some notorious war criminals, people who should actually be before an international criminal court.
But at the end of the day, Ian, at the end of the day, I mean, Hamid Karzai's been in office for over 8 years now, and these corrupt elements didn't appear the day after the elections. They were very much there by most reports before the elections, and that was a time when the Americans, the British and the NATO allies were very positive about Hamid Karzai.
Contesting them, and the Taliban actually came in. One of the reasons for Taliban's success was the Afghan discomfort and hatred of what the warlords had been doing to each other and to the Afghans beforehand. It turned out that the solution was worse than the illness, as it turned out. But there was no love in the Afghan people for these warlords. That was what brought the Taliban in to begin with, and now they were brought back again. So, of course, every time you have one of these warlords raking off hundreds of millions of dollars of aid or walking around with blood on his hands, then you're basically recruiting for the Taliban again.
Gordon Brown, when he said international support for Afghanistan depends on 5 key areas, he talked of security, governance, reconciliation, economic development, engagement with his neighbours. When Brown talks of reconciliation, though, does he mean with the Taliban, Hamid? Britain has long backed dialogue with them, and there's reports now that America is seeking dialogue with the Taliban. What's your assessment? Talking to the terrorists, a good idea or not?
Well, you see, there is an element within the Western government which recognizes the reality. The reality is the Taliban they were representing a particular social segment of the society, and not as strongly as they do now, but at the time when they were defeated, when they were swept aside, I don't think they were completely eliminated. What happened, they went back into their sanctuaries and their own towns and in their own villages, and they just stayed there. They have social support. So what the Taliban have become now, the phenomenon has now turned into a social movement, and that is why I pointed out earlier that there is no military solution to social problems. So there is a tendency in the West to say that there is some sort of, quote-unquote, good Taliban and bad Taliban, the moderate and the extremists. So I think eventually they will realize that the only way to devise an exit strategy is to talk with the enemy. Now, there's also another problem, and this is haunting them as well, within their own public, with their own constituencies in the West, that how do you talk to the terrorists? The problem is that Taliban, just by categorizing them as terrorists, was a huge problem, a huge phenomenon was simplified. And therefore now to kind of re-engage them and say, look, we're talking to them, they have to come up with new rhetoric, with new language.
Yeah,